Here we go. Here's a fun one. Or might be a fun one. I don't know. We're gonna laugh at the children. How Generation Alpha will change society forever. It's more of the same. Yes. Ender Magnolia is just Ender Lilies, but it's called Magnolia now, and it's in more of a fantasy future setting. Weird mix of the two. There's probably a term for it. I don't know what it is. Anyway, ancient tech. Maybe not ancient tech. I think it's kind of like steampunky. Brodie, why are BIOSes / UEFIs always terrible? Because there's like 2 companies that make them, and they're all literally the exact same software. And all of the ones you think are like better than others are just skins on top of like 2 companies that are making the software. Yeah, maybe it's 3. Maybe. Anyway, how Generation Alpha will change society forever.
Generation Alpha is on track to be the most
children. We don't like them. They play Roblox and Fortnite.
Troubled generation of all time, and it's not even close. This is the era of mindless consumption, extreme polarization, and soulless, meaningless junk food entertainment.
Remember when you would go outside? Remember when you would go outside and you'd go have fun outside? What a time that was. Remember when you wouldn't spend 8 hours on your phone?
The explosion of mental illness and violent crime to rampant consumerism and alarmism, our world is slowly degrading. And Gen A has been placed at the forefront of it all. Throw in a worldwide pandemic that shut down the entire globe.
Remember when you would be a child and you wouldn't have a phone? Remember when if you wanted to use the internet, you would go to a computer? What a crazy idea that is.
For months, unhinged inflation and technology that's becoming progressively more invasive, and you get a recipe that could destroy the minds and lives of millions. This is the generation of your little cousins, your younger siblings, or maybe even your kids. And while it may seem that these characteristics closely resemble those of Gen Z, there's one minor distinction that makes Gen A something that has never been seen in human history. Now, for those of you born anywhere between the 80s and the early 2000s...
Great movie. Everyone should watch Nemo as well, but no, go Back to the Future.
2 main parts. Life without the internet and life with the internet.
When did you first get an internet connection? Did you have one when you were, like, very young? Because I didn't get an internet connection at home until I was... I think I was 8 or so. Because my family didn't really care about the internet. They came from a farming background. They didn't know what a computer was. They didn't have a computer. 2005, 2006, yeah. I think it was about 2000 and... YouTube existed, so I think it was 2000 and... Probably 2006. I don't think I was there right at the start of YouTube. But yeah, I didn't have a computer at home until I was, like, 8-ish. And like same with the internet connection as well. Didn't have either. I did have a PS2. Don't get me wrong. I had a PS2, but I didn't have an internet connection. Dad just donated a Windows 9 XPC to us running Windows XP.
Call a time when phones were actually used for talking and when computers served as a tool.
And when phones had cords on them.
Rather than an alternate universe. You probably spent most of your free time outside or with other people. You were fully immersed in tangible reality and your digital...
I still had a PS2, don't get me wrong. I still played 8 hours of video games a day. But I went to my friend's house to play video games.
Experiences were probably limited to a couple hours a day. Rather than scrolling through 300 different TikToks in an hour, you watched a couple episodes of your favorite show. When you were bored, you were forced to make use of your imagination or just sit there and enjoy the silence for a little while. Fast forward to 2023 and your life is probably completely different. You likely spend most of your time on a phone or computer, and while that might be problematic, it doesn't...
So, how many of you don't like there to be no background noise and will just put a video on? Just because. Like, there's just nothing happening. You just put a video on in the background. Because I know that I do it. I know he's talking about Gen Alpha here, but everyone does this. Kind of. Yeah. I'm the same. I don't like quietness. Yeah. Yeah, it's something I definitely catch myself doing.
Doesn't change the fact that your developmental years were spent without the presence of this invasive technology.
But at the same time, I didn't start doing that until I was an adult, right? I wasn't doing this from the age of 3. Like, I have younger nieces and nephews, when I go see them, like my youngest niece, I think she's like 6 or 7. She will grab when I go see her, she will grab her iPad, sit on my lap, and then just watch, like, I don't know, Minecraft videos or something, Roblox video. I don't fucking know. And just like, not, just sit there with the iPad.
And because of that, you have a firm comprehension of the contrast between the two eras, which allows you to quickly recognize the issues.
Actually, to be fair, I see adults doing this as well. I go to the gym, and I see people between sets, 5-10 minutes scrolling through TikTok. Does she know you make videos? Probably. I don't know if her mum's ever shown her the channel. Either way. Yeah, I see people at the gym. They're like, they'll do like, maybe even not a full set, like a half set, and then just scroll through TikTok for like 5-10 minutes. Like, what are you doing? Like, do you know why it takes you so long at the gym? This is why.
Unique to modernity, even if you might fall victim to them sometimes. But what if you didn't have that point of reference? What if you were born in the last decade? What if you were thrust right into the most unstable?
Did my entire rant get missed? Well, whatever. What I was saying is, if there's a possibility we look back at, like, giving kids phones in the same way as, like, we look back at cigarettes, we look back at, like, beating a child, right? Where it's considered this idea of basically child abuse to do so. It's possible that's not going to be what happens, but I don't know. I don't think someone who's, like, 3 years old should have a phone. I didn't drop any frames on my side, so it's possible Restream died there. I don't know. Anyway, let's move on.
It begins in the womb, where the development of the hypersensitive fetus is already being impacted by record levels of obesity and unnatural amounts of radiation from digital devices. Upon birth, the kid begins to observe the people around it constantly staring down at their phones, which they might come to think of as an instinctual human function for all we know. Upon reaching 6 months old, babies already have an understanding of the basics of a touchscreen.
Yeah, which is fucking crazy.
Age of 1 displaying the ability to swipe. If you've been
Have you seen the videos
around a baby recently, you know that they are completely infatuated with smartphones. They tend to
Have you seen the videos of kids that are asleep who are scrolling in their sleep? It's wild.
Far more interest in screens than any other toy. And this makes perfect sense considering the fact that the luminescent, interactive world of a phone screen is simply unlike anything else. The lights, sounds, and rapid movements are
I don't think it's just
unbelievably
social media.
stimulating to a baby's brain. By the age of 5 or 6, most kids already have their own iPads, which renders the rest of their toys completely useless. This is where they first encounter the confusing and detached world of the internet, where they will spend around 6 hours a day scrolling through mindless short-form content
let's
watching
talk about
other
how long I'm
people
on the
play
internet.
with toys. And
18 plus, 11 hours a day. Yeah, I can see
if
that.
their parents didn't take the time to enable a child lock, it's likely they'll come across something that even adults find scarring.
What the fuck? I don't use TikTok.
And you
And there's
obviously
a good
can't
reason
expect
for
the kid
it.
to be able to moderate themselves, which is why it's the parent's responsibility. But this can be much harder than it sounds. You see, having a smartphone has become standard for children as young as 7. Because of this, the entire culture of this generation is dictated by the internet. Everything they talk about or do for fun is sourced from the internet. So the one kid whose parents wouldn't buy them a phone is bound to be an outcast from the 2nd grade. Their ability to converse, socialize, and play is limited. Since
I think what you need is you need groups of parents to come together and decide, hey, we're not going to get, like, an entire class of parents decide, hey, we're not going to give our kids phones until X age. Like, if like one person's missing out, it becomes like a social issue. If everybody's missing out, well, they can get over it.
Don't have access to the digital world that all the other kids are living in. And we know what excessive internet use does to adults, so we can only assume the impact would be much harsher on young children. But we also know how terrible social isolation can be, especially at a young age. So this leaves parents with a hard choice. Either they expose their 7-year-old to the brain rot of the internet, or they shield them from it and inhibit their ability to develop socially. Okay, fast forward to the current day.
I disagree on that, just on the basis that, like, if you can get a group of parents together to decide not to give everyone a phone, like a kid's gonna learn how a phone works if you give it to them at 13 instead of giving it to them at 5. Like, I didn't have my first smartphone until I was like 14, 15. Like, you work it out pretty quickly, even if you get it as like a teenager.
Where the oldest of Gen A is about 13 years old. While many kids at this point will have had some level of developmental impairment, the real damage has yet to be done. Around this age is the time when many kids start to develop worldviews, opinions, and identities. They begin to comprehend some of the underlying dynamics of society and human nature.
Society.
And naturally, their curiosity
We live in a
directs them towards
society.
the internet. And while the internet can be good for this, it has a far greater potential to ruin it. The internet is filled with useful information and resources, but it's completely smothered by masses of sensationalist garbage that's designed to hijack your emotions.
We
and
love
get you
TikTok.
click. And we adults fall for this all the time, so why wouldn't young children? The algorithm isn't going to serve them something educational or appropriate for their age. It's going to serve them a fresh batch of mind-numbing waste. It's going
Well,
to serve them
here's a fun thing. TikTok in China, Douyin, it actually does focus on educational content, which is a very intriguing difference between the platforms.
the same content that everyone else clicked on. And due to the nature of the internet, this is almost always something that's crafted to be as shocking and stimulating as possible. Or in other words, something that doesn't align with reality. And this works a lot like a drug. It's fast-paced, interesting, and gives you full control. As long as you keep swiping, it keeps delivering. It offers everything that reality lacks and more. And since Gen A has been exposed to this world from such a young age, its effects will have a much longer time to incubate, with most of that time being during some of the most important years of mental development. As a result,
It was a
Gen
bit more
A
than
will
10 minutes
likely
ago.
see a much bigger spike in mental illness than Gen Z, and at a much younger age. Everything from depression to anxiety will be more rampant than ever.
I did
The
finish
less
this story
common
at some
disorder
point.
among Gen Z,
One
known
day.
as internet psychosis, will likely become more widespread among Gen A. And everything only gets worse from here. You see, one of the coping mechanisms we have for the illness and emptiness caused by our modern habits is to double down and dive even deeper. And through
Yeah, I'm depressed scrolling through TikTok all day. What's the solution? More TikTok.
this, many people actually find an outlet. Enter the toxic wastelands of Twitter and Reddit. Some of the people who need help the most come to these sites in search of an identity and fulfillment. In doing so, they come across a vast array of different political and cultural rabbit holes. Eventually, they find one appealing enough and allow it to completely take control of their identity and personality. And this is what has caused political and cultural discourse to become so diluted and polarizing. When a person's entire identity is completely reliant on certain ideas or beliefs, a simple questioning of those beliefs is an attack on them as a human being. And this problem will only be worse with Gen A down the line. Gen A doesn't know what the more tame political climate of the past looks like. They weren't around for the time when most people didn't really care or think about politics.
Yeah, remember when
at
people
all.
were
By
normal?
26
Remember when people were just like, they're just not weird?
2016, the oldest of Gen A was 6, and they got to witness the unprecedented 2016 election. Everything that has happened since 2016 is the only experience or knowledge they have about politics, which will heavily shape how they view it as they mature. And this will have
Imagine that. Imagine you're a child. The first US president you saw was Trump, and what you must think that US politics are cooked. Unless they aren't American, everybody's American. America is the center of the world. Nobody cares about local politics. American politics dominates all media.
massive implications down the line. Gen A will likely turn out to be even more radical and zealous than Gen Z, and the internet will be their main outlet of expressing it. And those who manage to avoid this trap won't have it much easier. As society becomes more divided and polarized, it becomes harder for those floating in between to find meaning and a sense of community. Because of this, Gen A will also be more nihilistic than Gen Z. And while this is terrible for us, not everyone loses here. Modern corporations stand to profit massively from this. If you take a generation suffering from mental illness, meaninglessness, and the inability to critically think, and you pair it with the fact that it's the largest generation in human history, you get something that corporate America could only dream of. Corporations have already taken note of this with Gen Z, using the masses of data they produce to
If you want a good reason to know that social media might be kind of not great for you, Zuckerberg doesn't let his kids use Facebook. So, think on that one.
excessive social media use in order to make advertising more predatory and mind-reading. And this has worked fantastically for them. But in many ways, Gen Z is simply just a warm-up for Gen A. Since Gen A will spend even more time scrolling, they will produce even more data for corporations, which will then be used to make advertising even more effective. So as Gen A matures and enters the workforce, consumer spending and corporate profits will soar even higher.
Data.
The mental instability paired with large swaths of data at corporations' disposal will make business easier than ever. As a result, the inflation-induced poverty we see today will only continue to get worse. Consumerism and materialism will be more prevalent than ever, but not in the traditional sense. You see, in the past, these things were exhibited through clothes, cars, houses, and jewelry. But that was back in the 2010s when people valued reality over the digital world. We're talking about 2035, when Gen A is in their 20s, while video games...
I don't know. I still think... I would be very surprised if Gen A kids, when they get a bit older, even just now, aren't obsessed with like fucking Gucci. We love our ugly ass clothes because they're expensive. Yeah, people are gonna care about it in a video game, but I don't think that's gonna replace physical materialism. Not even remotely.
Cosmetics and virtual reality existed before, they'll be the standard now. People will now pay for virtual clothes, virtual mansions, and virtual supercars as if they were real, and they will experience it all through a VR headset. And corporations will be happy to deliver, considering the fact that it's not real and costs nothing to produce. People will spend half their day working just to make enough money to sustain their physical bodies and virtual life. And as time goes on, the corporations behind this continue to gain more leverage over the people as they become more dependent on their product. The only thing that will remain unchanged is Western corporations' exploitation of third world labor to produce everything. And it's around this point that a hyper-reality will officially come into existence, alongside the beginning of the end of our species. Now, this is a problem that will take another decade to develop.
Okay, this has gone way more doomy than I expected it to.
Require some serious intervention to prevent. And so far, no one is taking it all that seriously, with experts referring to the situation as an unintentional global experiment. We've seen how a lot of this plays out with Gen Z, and it's been nothing short of tragic. Gen Z has declined in almost every measure that matters, and the internet has made us painfully aware of it. To think that this cycle is going to repeat itself with another generation, and that no one is really standing up to it?
Do you want to know what one of the fun statistics is? I think it's 45% of Gen Z males have never approached a woman for a date. I think the number is 45%. It's either 40 or 40. It's some ridiculously high number.
It shows you just how much everyone cares. The reality is that even though younger people are suffering from these problems the most, it's affecting people of all ages. And the entire situation is a catch-22. Our way of dealing with these problems is the same behavior that causes them in the first place. The only real way to end this vicious cycle would be to completely desert many of these modern technologies. But this option wouldn't be without problems either.
Go live in the forest.
Our economy is reliant on this technology. Many of the largest companies in the world are the producers of this technology, and they employ millions of us. So if they go under, so do we. The next 10 years could prove to be some of the most confusing and problematic years in human history. And while we can make a rough guess as to how things will play out, there's really no limit to what could happen.
What? That got a bit more doomery than I expected it to, but yeah, Gen Z's cooked. Gen Z's cooked. Gen A is burnt. I think that's a good way to put it. Gen A was burnt the second they were born. They had no hope in the world. There was nothing that could ever save Gen A. Oh, God.